Here is our star chart for this little activity. The first thing we need to do with this star chart is we need to identify the celestial equator. Now, this is going to be that horizontal line dividing the page in half, and it's a projection of Earth's equator out into space. So we'll go ahead and we'll highlight this red. The next thing we're asked to do is to identify the ecliptic. Now, the ecliptic is this wavy line, and remember the ecliptic is the plane on which the sun, the planets, the moon, kind of everything lies along. And it's going to go up above the celestial equator during kind of the summertime and summer months, and then below the celestial equator during the wintertime and winter months. And this should make sense, because if we remember, we expect to see the sun higher in the sky in the summer and lower in the winter. Next, I want you to notice that there's a lot of information along the ecliptic. There's dates, along with longitude lines, which will come in handy later. I know there's information along the top and edges of the pages, but you don't really want to use any of that. All of your information is going to be held along the ecliptic once we get into things. Now that we've made our ecliptic, we got to find our birthday. So use those dates along the ecliptic, mark where your birthday is, and make sure to add it to your lab sheet. Once we've done this, we have to create our belt of the zodiac. So the zodiac belt is a 16-degree wide band that's centered along the ecliptic. Since it's 16 degrees wide total, but centered on the ecliptic, this means we need to go 8 degrees above and 8 degrees below the ecliptic. Now, what we're going to do is use these degree measurements on the edge of the page to make a hash mark at 8 degrees below the ecliptic and 8 degrees above the ecliptic. I then want us to go around and make these hash marks at every vertical line that we see as well, going in 8 degrees above and 8 degrees below the ecliptic. Once we have all these hash marks down and identified, we're going to go ahead and connect these to create our belt of the zodiac. So to connect these, you want to make a nice smooth line that follows the curvature of the ecliptic as best as you can. You are going to have to freehand here a little bit, so it's okay if it's not perfect, but try and keep that width consistent. From yellow to blue line should be about the same the whole way. Now this is just the top of the belt of the zodiac, so we also need to add the bottom of the belt of the zodiac. And here we go. There is now a 16-degree wide band. The next thing that we need to do here is we need to start looking back along the ecliptic, which is that yellow thing we drew, and notice the degrees of celestial longitude. We're going to go ahead and we're going to make 12 divisions at every 30 degrees at correct celestial longitudes. So we're going to start at 0 degrees, which is all the way on the right hand of the page. And from 0, we're going to go all the way to 30 degrees, and at 30 degrees, we're going to make a mark. I would like you to extend this mark so that it goes all the way from the top of the belt of the zodiac down to the bottom of the belt of the zodiac. This is a boundary condition. This is going to be where one of our zodiac signs starts and ends. Here's the 0 degree. It goes a little bit below there. Now we're going to go to 60, another line, and then 90 and 120 and so forth. You want to do all of these. Once you're done with this, and if you've done it correctly, you will notice that you have 12 divisions along the belt of the zodiac, which should make sense because there are 12 zodiac signs, so we should have 12 zodiac rectangles. Also, try and curve with the belt when you draw these lines. So instead of everything being straight up and down, curve with the belt. Next, we're going to go through and label the sign names in red above each one of these little rectangles. Now, please label them as I've asked in the lab handout or as you see me doing here. Don't read the constellation names. That'll confuse you because, again, we're talking about signs here and not constellations. Just to check, each of the 12 boxes should have one of the zodiac names above it. The next thing we need to do here is we want to figure out in the data table when our sign starts, the celestial longitude, and that's at every one of those 30-degree intervals. Then we need to figure out the date that each sign starts. So on our wheel, all the stuff on the interior is relative to the signs, and all the stuff on the exterior is relative to your constellations. So for example, the sign of Leo starts right at this little boundary I have identified, and you're going to use the dates here to find out that Leo's sign starts on July 24th. Virgo's sign starts on August 23rd. Going back to our data table, we see that Aries is actually the first sign, and then Taurus is the next one. So we're going to find our starting dates for all 12 of these and move through the rest. Then we're going to figure out what sign we're in and just figure out where your birthday meets a sign. From here, we're going to identify all of our constellations and highlight them in green. You may need to do a little bit of Googling here to figure out what stars are all of your constellations. The next part is to figure out when each constellation starts, or when the sun first enters the constellation. You're going to record this in green as well. So going back to our zodiac dial, remember we need to look on the exterior of this wheel where all of our constellation information is. Aries is the first constellation that we're concerned with, so we're going to go to our wheel and we're going to figure out where does the constellation Aries start. Don't accidentally look at the sign. We don't care about that. We want the constellation itself down here. So if I look at the constellation Aries, there's a boundary right here, and that boundary appears to be on April 19th. Here's another boundary. This is where Taurus starts, and this boundary is going to be on May 14th. Once I have this information, I can go ahead and add it to my data table for Aries and Taurus, and then you want to do all 13 constellations. Remember, there's 13 constellations and only 12 signs. We then want to go through and on the ecliptic make a bunch of green boundary lines, just like we did with the black boundary lines for the signs. So this is going to require us using the dates that we have on the data table and drawing these vertical green lines. So from our data table, we know that the constellation of Aries starts on April 19th. So I'm going to go along my ecliptic and find where April 19th is and draw a nice green boundary line. I then see that the constellation Taurus starts on May 14th. So I'm going to go along the ecliptic and find where May 14th is and draw my nice green boundary line on May 14th to, again, identify this is where the constellation starts. This boundary condition is where the sun first starts entering the constellation Taurus, which you see is just to the left. If you've done this correctly, what you'll end up seeing is 13 green boundaries, or 13 green boxes, because there's 13 zodiac constellations, with 12 black boxes or black boundaries because there's only 12 zodiac signs. Once we've done this, you can identify where your birthday was and determine what is your zodiac constellation. Now for me, even though my sign is a Scorpio, my zodiac constellation is actually a Virgo. I hope this was helpful, and feel free to get started on everything else. If you have questions, please stop by my office.